ASLR actually does. It randomizes the base addresses of the DLLs. But if you look closely, you'll see that it's only the first 2 bytes which are randomized. Okay, if you look at, I don't know, take something random from there, at this jump, then you'll see that in this situation, the last 2 bytes are 16A1, and it's going to be exactly the same here. So this genius guy says, okay, so let's try a 2-byte overwrite of the EIP. And let's see what that actually does, because it's really interesting. So what we'll do is we'll change the proof of concept to give us not a 4-byte overwrite of EIP, but a 2-byte overwrite. So what we'll do is we'll shorten the ANI header structure by 2 bytes. So rather than having 58 here, we'll type 56. And here, let's just put some breakpoints for now. Pardon me. All right, so let's see what happens when I crash Internet Explorer now. Great. So this is our 2-byte overwrite. Now the question is, how does this actually help us? You'll see that the crash happens in user32.dll, and we can't have our relative jumps in any DLL, let alone user32, because once again, those addresses will be changed each and every time. So what was done here was a really, really interesting thing. Some genius said, okay, let's look for, sorry, before that, where do we jump to? So this is also interesting. Look at this. If we look at EBX, and we'll look at the address that is held in EBX, we'll actually see that we're pointed to the beginning of our ANI header. So a jump to EBX, the pointer, not the register, will take us to the beginning of the file. And this is what we'll have to deal with when we then want to start executing our shellcode. So jump to pointer EBX, that's where we want to go. So if we could find a jump to pointer EBX in user32.dll, we could probably use a partial overwrite to get to that address, no matter where it is located in memory. And that's like the genius step that was taken to bypass ASLR. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's see if we can find an address that will suit our purposes. Yeah, find user32.dll in here and I'll give you a free Coke. Thank you, yes, thank you.
The whole room there, but...
Okay, so this is user32.dll, and we will be looking for a jump to pointer EBX command. And thankfully, we've got a few. Not good, not good, not good, not good. Good, but I don't like. Not good, excellent. Okay, so we've got a jump to pointer EBX right here. And this is in user32.dll. Now look at the address. Okay? The first half of this address will be randomized on the next reboot. The second half of the address won't. But that doesn't really matter, because since we're crashing within user32.dll, if we do a partial overwrite, we'll always be in user32.dll when the overwrite happens, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Okay. So, now we need to start playing with our ANI file and see how we can manipulate code execution into this overflow. So let's try and do that. I'll close this. And I'll say, okay, this is where we have our partial overwrite of EIP. So what I want to have is these last bytes overwriting EIP, which is currently pointing to user32.dll. And I will do this, little endian, gosh, I hate this, AB7B, I think. Yes, AB7B. Okay, so this should actually bring us to that jump to pointer EBX location in user32.dll. And if you remember, that will actually bring us to the beginning of the RIF header. So classically, what I'd like to do now is fill this with NOPs or just stick my shellcode here. But obviously, this will damage the ANI file format. So I can't really do that. I can't just go shoving my shellcode everywhere because then, Windows won't recognize this as an ANI file. So here, what was actually done was really interesting because they had to work through the ANI file structure and not break it, and then find a way to get to the shellcode. Okay, so let's see how that works. Obviously, we can't overwrite any of these instructions, which is a bit problematic because we're going to land there. But fortunately, or unfortunately, depends on which side of the fence you're on, these instructions will not damage our stack in such a way that will prevent us from executing our code. So let's just put a couple of breakpoints right here and see what happens when we run this file under a debugger. All right, so once again, double-click, shove it on the Ollie. And this time, what I'll do is I'll put a breakpoint on our return address, and we'll see if it actually lands there as expected.
Can you increase the font size?
No. Sorry. I'm sorry. OK. So let's try and get to user32.dll. User32.dll. It's still not there. This is a bug in Ollie which I never really figured out yet. And we want to look for our return address, which is here. Okay, so I'll put a breakpoint here, and we'll refresh the page, and we'll see if we actually land there. If we have, then we did well, and we've bypassed ASLR. So refresh, and we've got Ollie is actually broken exactly at that point. That means we've hit our jump. And just to remind you, EBX holds the address which holds the beginning of our ANI file. So let's jump. Let's take this jump. And once again, I just want to show you this. We'll follow in dump. And I'll disassemble this. And you can actually see that the instructions here are exactly the same as the instructions here. And this is indeed the beginning of our ANI file. So we'll execute the RIFF equivalent commands. And as you can see, these commands aren't detrimental to our stack, which is good for me. So F7, 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 and I've hit my breakpoints. So this is like minimal code execution, which is good, but we still don't have our shell. So after looking at the ANI file format, they actually realized that they can shove their shellcode at the end of the file without damaging the file itself. Problem is, we can't jump so far. We can't jump from here all the way down here because we don't have enough space to put these instructions. We just have 2 bytes. And we can't push a short jump further than, like, what is it, 128 bytes. So we need to find another place to sort of hop into in order to be able to get to our shellcode. Okay? And as it happens, there are another couple of bytes in this file which we can safely overwrite. And these bytes end up being here. So what we'll actually do is we'll replace these breakpoints with a short jump to here. So we'll just shove in a short jump there. I think it's 22 bytes, which translates to EB16. And we'll put our new breakpoints here. And while I'm at it, I'd just